What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10, and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we begin our talks on the Sorcerer class. I know that this is a lot of people's favorite out there, and honestly, it's a ton of fun. This is a very unique spin on the full caster. You know, we really haven't talked about the main full casters, you know what I mean? Obviously, we've talked about things like Bard and Cleric and Druid and that kind of thing, but a lot of them focus on doing other things than necessarily just the spell casting, right? With Sorcerer, we are very reliant on our spell casting, and same thing with Wizard, which we'll be getting to here in a while. And then, you know, Warlock has a lot of stuff to do with it. They're a little more versatile, but they focus a lot on their magic as well. So here we are hitting the final trifecta of these big damage dealing focused, at least most of the time, spellcasters, and it's exciting to be able to get into this as we are entering the home stretch of this series. So if you're ready, I'm ready to begin this final leg in our journey, even though it's a long one. Before we jump into it, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Of course, also make sure to share the video with your friends and click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. So what is a sorcerer? What makes the sorcerer different from some of the other classes, right? So you have things like the warlock, which we haven't talked to yet, but you make a deal, right? You make a deal with some kind of entity and you get powers in exchange for whatever it happens to be. Wizard, you read a lot of books, right? You have even the bard that relies on music. You have the druid that relies on nature, that kind of thing. The sorcerer just kind of does it. And so obviously the sorcerer gets a bad rap a lot of the time for being spoiled, right? You know, maybe he's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline, I don't know. But it's really an interesting way of turning spellcasting on its head in its versatile options. Now, you can tell by how long this video is that we're not going to be here for very long talking about this, because one thing about the sorcerers is that they are very restricted in their high power at the same time. What I mean by that is they don't get that many features when it comes to part of their base class, and they really get a lot fewer spells than most of your other full casters. You're only going to get access to 15 spells throughout your entire lifetime, and that's pretty rough. Right now, you can forget some and get new ones on there because we are a learned class. We've talked about learned classes, but it's been a while since we've done that, so we'll give a refresher on what that means and how it differentiates itself from things like the cleric and the druid and the paladin and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's still really robust in how little you get. You still can do a lot with it, but how does it stack up to the other classes? Let's find out. Before we start, of course, big disclaimer, like what I do with all of my class ranking guides, and that is the fact that this is a very much imperfect system. I'm fully aware that this is not a great way to necessarily do apples to apples comparisons between them, but it's tough, right? Because if we look at just a class by itself without looking at subclasses with it, obviously that's an unrealistic type of picture for what a build is going to be. However, it's hard to look at it when one subclass that is a 7 out of 10 in one class and one that's a 7 out of 10 in another, they fill different roles, they do different things, and so it's not even fair to, you know, line up these subclasses that do similar things like that. There's just not a great way to do that. And so what we do for this is we're just going to look at the class itself. What does just the class get? We're not looking at any subclasses today, and how does that stack up to other classes? Again, I know it's not perfect, but it's about as good as we're going to get looking at it in a weird little vacuum here. So with that out of the way, let's jump into it. We start off, of course, with kind of the guts of what a sorcerer is, and that is looking at things like hit points, hit dice, looking at proficiencies, that kind of thing. What makes the sorcerer if you happen to start with it? And so let's take a look. Number one, our hit dice is a D6, which is as bad as it gets. Only this and the wizard get a D6, and it makes you incredibly frail. So we are not off to a good start there. As far as armor proficiencies, we are also not looking good, as we have no armor proficiency at all. That's also very difficult because now we are incredibly squishy. We don't have a high AC and we don't have a lot of hit points, so gentle breezes are not our friends. Then looking at weapons, we get daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, and light crossbows. These are not the best weapons out there, especially daggers, darts, and slings. You don't really see those a whole lot outside of rogues going nuts with those. You don't really see darts much at all outside of very specific builds, and I'll put one up in the icon above if you want a dart-based build. Does insane amounts of damage. But then you've also got things like quarterstaffs and light crossbows, which are a little bit more likely if you're going to even carry a weapon. On this class, you may not even do that, so it is what it is. We get no tool proficiencies, which honestly I don't even care about because I don't think tools are all that important in 5e. They just don't do nearly as much as what they're advertised they can do unless you're really adhering to Xanathar's rules, which almost nobody does, so oh well. For saving throws, however, we get Constitution and Charisma, and now we're getting something a little bit more redeeming here with getting Constitution saving throws. That is really helpful for maintaining concentration on our spells, so I'm not opposed to getting this here. The Charisma saving throw also is not that bad. Of our quote-unquote bad saving throws, that's probably going to be the best one. And so I'll honestly take those saving throws over most of the others that are considered to be bad, things like Intelligence and Strength. And then for our skills, we get 2 from the list that's on screen. And so, that's fine. You know, some classes get 3, a few get 4. But so we're at the low end of that. And the list is pretty short, but none of those skills are necessarily bad. Insight's pretty good. Persuasion's pretty good. Arcana makes sense, although it's intelligence based. So it is what it is. And then finally, looking at starting equipment, again, this doesn't really have a bearing on our ranking here because you could just as easily do gold buy and completely ignore this. So I don't count this for the ranking, but just to mention it. We could get a light crossbow and 20 bolts or any simple weapon. We get a component pouch or an arcane focus, a dungeoneer's pack or an explorer's pack, and we get 2 daggers. So looking at this as a kit together, at least looking at what we get to start off with, this is pretty bad. We don't have a lot to work with here. We have no health, we have no armor, we have mostly bad weapons, or at least the best weapon we have is a light crossbow because we don't want to be in melee, so we really don't want the quarterstaff. Slings are pretty bad. Daggers are okay when boosted. Darts are okay when boosted, but without that, you're doing a D4, and that's not that great. So that's not good. So yeah, Constitution saving throws is really the only good thing about this kit. So that's kind of rough. You're gonna be in a weird spot when you start off at level 1 as a sorcerer here because you run into a goblin or 2 and you will be going down very fast. You will be going down very quickly. So you want to be getting some levels behind you very quickly in order to buff up just a little bit. Overall, we're not starting off so hot. This is going to be a 5 out of 10 from me. I just don't think that our main guts here give us a lot to work with, as we are just going to go down to about anything, honestly. So with that out of the way, let's start looking at our levels. Number 1, we get our subclass actually at level 1. Again, we're not covering subclasses today, but we will of course begin with Aberrant Mind next week, which I know is a fan favorite, so I'm looking forward to covering that. But let's skip ahead and we are going to get spellcasting, just like any of our other full casters. You get your spell casting right off the bat. And so sorcerers are a little interesting with theirs. They are a learned class rather than a prepared class. And so what this means is that, say, take the druid for instance. The druid can wake up on any particular day and look at the entire druid list and swap out spells depending on a number of maximum spells you can have that is dependent on your wisdom in that case. And then you can prepare them on a given day depending on what you need. Sorcerer is a learned class. Once you take that level in Sorcerer, you learn a spell and it is known. That is in your brain. You don't have to worry about consulting a book or getting it from a deity. You know it, but you can't swap things out on a daily basis. So there is a little less prep there, but it makes your decisions all that more important because you have to pick it right. because you don't get to just switch them out as often. So that is a very important distinction to be aware of. And you really don't get that many spells. Like I said, you only get 15 by the time that you get to your final level, and you get that 15th spell at level 17. So that's pretty rough. That's pretty rough. So yeah, now you can of course replace spells every time you gain a level in Sorcerer. So if you do pick a spell that you end up not liking or just doesn't end up being as good as you think, you can swap it out for something else afterwards. But again, you have to unlearn the spell before and then learn this new one. So you just have to be really careful with your choices. Now, as far as what is on the Sorcerer spell list, it's pretty great actually. The Sorcerer spell list is quite beefy, honestly, and gives you a lot of versatile options, whether you're looking for damage, battlefield control, if you're looking for just a little bit of a boost to your defenses, there's some things for that. A lot of really, really good stuff. I'm not going to go through every spell, of course, because we would be here forever, but if you wanted to go for more of a melee type thing, you've got Booming Blade, which also plays into the Sorcerer type of thing. This is a great way to grab that Booming Blade there. You've got things like Firebolt for some easy damage from far away, Lightning Lure, Message, Minor Illusion, not too bad there, Prestidigitation, Shocking Grasp, Thunderclap, all pretty good as far as I'm concerned there on that list for cantrips. First level spells, there's some great ones: Absorb Elements, Burning Hands, Charm Person, Chromatic Orb, that's a big one, really, really good one to grab. Featherfall, Fog Cloud, Grease, Mage Armor to help us out with our defenses, Shield again to help with defenses, Silvery Barbs, and Thunder Wave, a lot of really good ones there. And of course it goes on and on and on. And of course, as we do these builds and I get to the high levels, I'll talk about the ones that are the best. But there's some really good stuff on this list for a variety of different play styles. And of course, you're probably going to be basing your play style a lot around whatever subclass you end up choosing. And what's nice is the Sorcerer list really does help you to go in whatever direction you want. If you want to focus on lightning damage and thunder damage and that kind of thing because you're a Storm Sorcerer, there's an ample opportunity to be able to do that. If you want to focus on being more of a dragon-y type thing and bring like fire and bring things like that and focus on being a dragon, you can do that if you are based on that subclass. There's a lot of variants here that you can do. Of course, Aberrant Mind next week. There's a lot of things that work like that, right? Mind Sliver comes to mind, and there are tons and tons of others. So you've got a lot of versatility in that list. So really, for a spell list and for what we get here, that's a 10 out of 10 for the spell casting. I really can't fault it too much. We also do get access to things like Wish. Once we get to 9th level spells, we get things like Blade of Disaster, Mass Polymorph, Meteor Swarm. We get all of the big ones, all of the big hitters. Power Word Kill is on there as well. Time Stop. I mean, once you get to 9th level spells, you are breaking reality as it stands, and 10 out of 10 as far as that goes for spellcasting. It absolutely cannot be lower. At level 2, we get Font of Magic, and this gives us access to an interesting mechanic called sorcery points. Now, these sorcery points are also based on spell slots, and we can actually interchange spell slots with sorcery points by using a handy dandy table, which we'll talk about in just a second. But basically, these are going to be used to fuel certain things that we want to do. Think of it similarly to things like Ki, right? We talked about Ki a while back whenever we talked about the Monk. And of course, you're going to have a number of sorcery points equal to your level in Sorcerer. So it's pretty easy to keep track of what your maximum is because of that. And so you then, of course, get flexible casting, which allows you to convert sorcery points to spell slots or vice versa. Now, here at 2nd level, it's really not fair to be ranking it here at 2nd level because we don't have anything to spend them on outside of spell slots right now, but we will once we reach the next level. So I'm gonna rank this based on us having things because otherwise it's kind of wonky, right? But the ability to swap between spell slots and sorcery points is actually very nice because in a clutch situation where maybe you don't need to spend a sorcery point and you would rather have that spell slot to spend, you can do that, or vice versa. And it's a bonus action in order to swap between these two. So you still have your action on your turn if you need to make this change on the fly in combat. So it's very viable as far as that goes. The cost can be steep at times depending on what you need, and it does of course cap out at 5th level spell slots for 7 points. But if you need it, you need it, and honestly, it might just be worth it to save you in a really clutch situation. I've got to give Font of Magic a 9 out of 10 because again, we're knowing about what we are going to be using it on here at 3rd level, and so I want to go ahead and think ahead to that. I can't rank it based on what we're only going to have for 1 level and then it gets a bunch of use next level. No, I'm ranking it assuming we have that at next level. Then at 3rd level, we get Meta Magic, and this is the reason why people play Sorcerers. Sorcerers get the ability to change their spells in very powerful and meaningful ways in the means of Meta Magic options. And these are really unique things that pretty much nobody else can do, at least not without significantly more resources. But the Sorcerer makes it look easy, which is kind of the whole point of the Sorcerer, right? And so we're gonna go through all these options and see which ones we like, which ones we don't like, all that good stuff. It's the video for it. Let's go ahead and jump in. The first one is going to be Careful Spell, and Careful Spell is going to cost us 1 sorcery point, and we can choose a number of creatures up to our Charisma modifier and choose those creatures to automatically succeed on saving throws that we forced on an opponent. So let's say this is the idea, right? We've got a bunch of people balled up on a battlefield and we want to launch a fireball, but we're gonna hit our friends and we probably shouldn't be doing that. Careful Spell allows you to give an automatic save on that spell that you are casting as long as it's a number of creatures equal to or less than your Charisma modifier, which generally should be plenty. So this is actually pretty good. I think it's good for the one that wants to be more fast and loose with everything. If you don't want to necessarily worry about positioning, or what I see more commonly is when your melee friends don't cooperate with you and you want to teach them a little bit of a lesson, but not a full lesson. You want to tell them, hey, maybe you should get out of the way when I'm casting these big fireballs and I'm catching 6 guys and you're right in the middle of it. Maybe you shouldn't be standing there. I don't know. Next is Distance Spell. This gives you extra range on a spell. It actually doubles the range at the cost of 1 sorcery point as long as the range is 5 feet or greater. So again, this is something that was inspired by the change to Booming Blade. Booming Blade has a range of self now, so this no longer qualifies, unfortunately. But of course, when you cast a spell that has a range of touch, you also get it out to 30 feet, which is pretty cool. The spell Shocking Grasp comes to mind there, right? It's a cantrip, but still being able to cast that at a 30-foot range is pretty cool. And of course, there are plenty of others. Inflict Wounds is another one that's really great. A lot of damage, but it's a melee spell. You can just do it at a distance instead. Very, very cool there. Empowered Spell. This sounds really, really good. You can spend 1 sorcery point to reroll a number of damage dice up to your Charisma modifier, and you have to use the new rolls. Now, you'll see something unique with Empowered Spell. That is that you actually can use this with a different type of meta magic option during the casting of a spell. Normally, you can only use 1. So if I Careful Spelled, I cannot also make it distant. They cannot both happen at the same time. So that's one thing to be careful of there. You have to just pick one or the other in that case. However, this one allows you to use more than 1 at a time, which can be very helpful. So you could be careful and not catch everybody, but then also empower it. So if you roll a bunch of 1s on your fireball, you can re-roll those and possibly do a little bit better. So that's cool. Definitely keep that in mind that some work that way and some don't. Extended Spell, if it has a duration of 1 minute or longer, the spell can be increased to a duration of 24 hours. This doesn't catch as many spells as what a lot of these others would, but there definitely is a use case scenario for this, and I'm sure that in my course of building all of these subclasses that we will use this at least once. Heightened Spell, this one doesn't sound all that great, but it actually is pretty nice. You can spend 3 sorcery points to give a target disadvantage on the first saving throw made against a spell. That's pretty good. And really the main reason why it's worded this way is just to make sure that when you cast something like Fireball, for instance, that could possibly force a saving throw onto, you know, multiple creatures, 3, 4, 5 creatures, depending, that it makes sure that you know that this is only going to affect the first creature that makes a saving throw on it. So again, kind of limited there, but still could be good depending on the order in which the saving throws can be rolled. That's what I see. Quicken spell, you're going to see this one constantly. For 2 sorcery points, you can flip a action to a bonus action on your casting time. That is huge, right? Things like Hold Person come to mind for me, and that is a really common way of playing a Sorcerer, is to bonus action go for Hold Person and then just go smiting all the way. It's wild. Yeah, Quicken Spell is very good, among the top here. Seeking Spell comes next. If you miss an attack roll on a spell, you can spend 2 sorcery points to re-roll, and of course you can use this with other options as well if you need to. Subtle Spell is here. This one is situational, but man, when it works out, it works out. You get to skip the somatic and verbal components of spells. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal, because if you are in the presence of a king or some other enemy and you're wanting to pull off some wiggly woos and do something crazy, but your enemy can see you doing what it is you're doing, that can be a problem. That can be a big problem, and this allows you to skip it. So definitely can be huge. It also is limited by how much your table cares about observing that you are doing verbal, somatic, and material components. Some tables will let you just get away with it and not really think about the fact that you had to do something in order for this to work out. So definitely talk to your DM and see how strict your DM is going to be on maintaining that this is how you have to do it, because if you're not going to worry about it, then don't take this. If you are, which you should, but if you are, definitely take this. It's really good. Transmuted spell, also really cool. You can spend 1 sorcery point to change the damage type of a spell from one of the types on the list to a different one. So acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, and thunder are all affected there. So you can make lightning ball or poison ball or thunder ball, cold ball, whatever you want to do. That can be very, very helpful when targeting certain weaknesses. Obviously monsters aren't super weak to everything, but if you can find something to target, then that can be huge, especially if it's on a group of things that are all weak to the same thing. Definitely great. And finally, the last one is Twinned Spell. And basically, if a spell does not have a range of self, we can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to target a second creature, as long as it only targeted 1 creature there before, which is pretty cool. The spell cannot be capable of targeting more than 1 creature there, so just something to be careful of there. Things like Magic Missile and Scorching Ray, of course, can target multiple targets. Things like Fireball, of course, already target multiple targets because it's an AoE type of thing. As long as it is a single targeting type of thing, it will work, and of course that can be huge as well. Again, things like Hold Person. There are tons and tons and tons of spells that this applies to. Very, very useful. So yeah, there's a lot going on here, and you only get 2 of these for right now. You will get more later, of course. You'll get a 3rd one at 10th level and a 4th one at 17th level, so that is something to be careful of. Again, your decisions very much matter on a sorcerer. Now, we'll talk about level 4 whenever we get there, and that helps to ease this up a little bit, but still, your decisions are very important as a sorcerer, and so it is very important, at least the way that I see it, to plan out what you want to be before you build a sorcerer. I know a lot of people like to ride by the seat of your pants and by what happens in the role play, and by all means that's what I normally would encourage. With sorcerers, you need to be at least conscious of the flavor you're going for, just so that you can get all the spells in at the right time, because you have such limited options. And same thing with this. You don't get a 3rd one until level 10. That is 7 levels away. And then another one at 17, another 7 levels. So just make sure you're getting what you want when you want it. Again, this is a 10 out of 10. It's really great and very meaningful what you can do with all of these. Now, obviously not all of them are 10 out of 10s, but enough of them are super good in order for me to give the feature as a whole that ranking. Things like Subtle Spell will absolutely come up in a more of a political intrigue type of situation. Things like the Heightened Spell can definitely come up for giving disadvantage on a really big sucker save type of thing. Quicken Spell will come up all the time because if you've got something on an action that you really want to knock out, or if you want to cast 2 spells in one turn, you can of course change a fireball over to your bonus action, and then of course the rules of spellcasting state that as long as your action spell is a cantrip, then you can cast again. And so you could go for something like Toll the Dead on your action, or something similar to that, something damage dealing on your action, which is huge, right? I definitely see this as being very useful, and I really can't give it anything less. Level 4, of course, we would get an ASI or feat normally, but we're not going to talk about that. We also get Sorceress Versatility, and this gives us the option to actually change a few things if we mess up, which is very helpful. This wasn't introduced until Tasha's, so it was kind of a house rule kind of thing up until then, but I think it's a good thing. I think it's really good to be able to have this stuff. So basically, whenever we reach an ASI level, we can swap out a meta magic feature for a different one, and we could also replace a cantrip for a different one if we wanted to. I love versatility like this. Definitely not a bad thing at all. It's an 8 out of 10 to be able to do these things. Of course, if you got it right the first time, then you're never going to use this feature, and so that's why it's not higher, but it's nice there for if you do make a little bit of a blunder in building. At level 5, we get another optional feature, and this is called Magical Guidance. So whenever we make an ability check that fails, we can actually spend a sorcery point to re-roll the d20, which could potentially turn the failure into a success. This is great, right? I think that that's a very, very nice help. It basically gives you advantage on the roll. It's free advantage for 1 sorcery point. I really don't know what to tell you, but that's really good. I really like that. That's a 9 out of 10. Being able to just kind of do it on an ability check is really helpful, and definitely could come into play again in a big sucker save situation if it is a social type of thing, because again, you're the charisma based thing. You're probably going to be the face of most parties you're in. So definitely could come up. I can see it coming up a lot. And so now we enter basically the drought of new features. We are here getting some of our subclass stuff. We get some scaling from other things, but for the most part, it's pretty bare until the end. So yeah, 6th level, subclass feature. 7th level, nothing. We just get a higher tier of spellcasting. 8th level, ASI. 9th level, new level of spells. We get 10th level meta magic option added on, right? 11th level, that's a new level of spells. 12th level, ASI. 13th level, no features, but we get a new level of spells. 14th level, we get a new subclass feature. 15th, we get 8th level spells. At 16th level, ASI. Then 17th level, another meta magic option for number 4, and we also get our 9th level spells, which is good. At 18th level, we get our final feature for our subclass. 19th level, we get an ASI, and then 20th level, we get Sorceress Restoration, which is our first new thing that we've gotten in a long time. We get to basically regain 4 expended sorcery points when we finish a short rest. That's the whole feature. That's the whole feature. So now we're very sleepy when it comes to wanting to take naps and get things back, which is fine. I don't know that I'm super pumped about that being my final thing that I get as a sorcerer. I feel like I could have gotten a lot better stuff there. So yeah, I don't know. That's a 7 out of 10 for me. It's nice. I definitely want to have 4 extras every time I take a nap, but is it a 20th level feature? I don't think so. I think it's a little much. So yeah, going back through, I want to briefly talk about different levels of spells since we ran through those so quickly. I didn't really go through them. My favorite spells, of course, for 2nd level spells, because we left off there. Crown of Madness, I really like there. Dragon's Breath, newer one, not too bad there for a bonus action for dealing damage. Enhance Ability, Enlarge Reduce. Flaming Sphere, we talked about Hold Person a bunch. trying to think what else. Misty Step and Mirror Image are also really good. Misty Step more so, definitely for me. Shadow Blade if you want to go for more of a weapon type of build there. Spider Climb definitely could be useful there. And finally, I like Wither and Bloom a lot, but you really have to be going for a specific type of flavor. Web can also be very useful there, depending on how you use that there. Blink can be good. It's not the best just because of the way that control works on it, but Counterspell, one of the best things in the game. Love that. Fireball, one of the best in the game. We get Fly, we get Haste, Hypnotic Pattern. That's basically the best ones that are out there for third level, along with Lightning Bolt, Major Image, Slow. Thunder Step is also great. We get all the water spells. Tons and tons of really good stuff there. Fourth level, Banishment, Blight, Charm, Monster, the top three there, awesome. Dimension Door, amazing spell for getting out of wherever you are. Greater Invisibility for being invisible, as it sounds. Polymorph, Ice Storm, Sickening Radiance, not too bad there. And then Wall of Fire, also amazing. Animate Objects at level 5, as well as Bigby's Hand and Cloud Kill, Cone of Cold. Just insane options here. Dominate Person, we've got Hold Monster, Insect Plague, Synaptic Static is really good. Teleportation Circle can also be really good, depending on the situation, for that long-term movement if you need to do that. 6th level spells, you've got things like Platinum Shield, you've got Globe of Invulnerability, which can be nice. The Investiture spells of Flame, Ice, Stone, and Wind can be good, but they're a little more situational, at least in my opinion. Mass Suggestion, that is not situational. That's pretty much always going to be good. Sunbeam, really good there as well. 7th level spells, Crown of Stars, Draconic Transformation, I love that one. Finger of Death, Firestorm, Plane Shift, Teleport. I mean, we're bending reality at this point. There's not a whole lot of bad stuff here. At 8th level, pretty much they're all amazing. Demi-Plane, Dominate Monster, Earthquake, Incendiary Cloud, Power Word, Stun, and Sunburst, all amazing. And then 9th level spells, all of them are insane. Blade of Disaster, Gate, Mass Polymorph, Meteor Swarm, Power Word Kill, Psychic Scream, Time Stop, and Wish. Yeah, they're all pretty fantastic. So where does the Sorcerer rank amongst the other classes? Again, this is tough because the main chassis of it is bad. However, the features of it are really good. And of course, not looking at any of our subclasses, which of course are really where our main source of power comes from, if you couldn't tell that, it's hard to really rank this one in a way that is the most fair. But if I had to choose, looking at all of these things, we have amazing spells to work with here. We have the ability to really take on a lot of different roles outside of basically a tank, right? We have the ability to be a blaster, to be a controller, to be anything that you want to do with magic. We can do it. We're a charisma-based class, so we're really good in social situations. We have the ability to take spells that really affect pretty much every aspect of D&D outside of maybe some parts of exploration, but that really wasn't our job to begin with because we're not a wisdom-based type of thing like the Ranger or the Druid, so that's not our role. So I don't really care about that nearly as much. We get so many powerful ways to augment our spells as well that normally other spellcasters would not have access to. Things like being able to quicken spells, things like being able to double the distance, being able to do them in a subtle manner. All of these things are amazingly powerful, and when used correctly can really shift the tide of battles, of social situations, of whatever it happens to be in that player's favor, and I really like that. So overall, looking at this thing, comparing it to where I think the other classes are, I don't think it's a 10 out of 10. I don't think that it's as good as things like the Bard or anything like that, because the Bard has things like being a skill monkey. This one is not a skill monkey, right? It's not the best of the best there is. Yes, at level 5, we get the ability to re-roll on one skill check. Who cares? Bards have a ton of proficiencies, expertise, they get jack of all trades, they have all this stuff. So as far as that goes, we're definitely not a 10 out of 10. And then so basically I'm like, okay, is this an 8 or is this a 9? I don't think it's lower than an 8. Even with how bare bones it is, I think everything here is so impactful, it can't be any lower. To me, I think I'm gonna have to drop it down to an 8, just because it is so frail. And yes, its spellcasting is really good, and I can definitely see the argument for it being a 9. I definitely get that. But it relies really hard on the subclass, and so if you get a really good subclass, this absolutely can rise. If you get a bad subclass, this absolutely will fall. Whereas you have other things like the Bard, where you don't have nearly as much variance there because the base class is so good. And again, that's why we've chosen to do the system the way that it is. So to me, I think an 8 is more than fair. It's very strong. It's very good, especially if you choose some of the best options that are out there, which of course I will be suggesting to you in the coming weeks. So what do you think of my ranking? Was I too harsh? Was I too generous? What do you think? I don't know. I think that my ranking was pretty spot on, and I hope that you guys agree. Of course, feel free to discuss it in the comments. And of course, next week, we are beginning our chat on the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. So yeah, I hope you guys will stick around for that. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. Of course, tomorrow we have week 5 of the LTM Pokemon Draft League going up, and I'm absolutely looking forward to that as well. So until next time, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.